Would you ever consider yourself a fanboy of a shoemaker, a boot maker, just a brand in general? This is going to be one of my first reaction videos. I'm going to react to the reactions or the responses to the YouTube channel Rose Anvil. He did a video recently where he deconstructed a pair of Alden Indy boots. Let's get into some of the basics of what this video covered. I'll share the link to the video so you can check that out. And then I'll also share the link and go through the other responses, those pieces of content that I'm going to speak about. A bit of background, Rose Anvil, his channel has kind of flourished out of a leather workshop that he created. I think it was mainly around the kind of camera holster, a leather camera holster that he developed, and then he turned this into a leather work YouTube channel where he deconstructs some of the most popular, or at least some of the most recognizable names. Everything from your entry level like Thursday boot up to Alden, Viberg, and kind of beyond that spectrum. This video, he went with the popular Alden Indy Boot. This is the classic Indy, which is the 405, so it has a very particular look to it. It's got the neoprene or neo-cork outsole. I think neoprene is a material, neo-cork is the outsole. But there's there's a very specific piece of construction. There's a very particular set of details that come with the actual Indy boot. There are various models that people refer to as the Indy boot, but this is actually the Indy boot. As we break down some of the key takeaways or the key opinions that he shared, was at first the leather, and the finishing on this leather was something that he wasn't a fan of. This has a painted finish versus a veg tanned or a dyed finish, which has a much more I'll say like translucent, just kind of using a plain language description, something that you can actually see the grain structure, whereas this particular leather and this particular boot has a much more even and much more consistent finish throughout the entire leather. One of the main takeaways was that the rand, the midsole, a lot of the core pieces of the actual construction were not real leather, it was leather board, which that's a trade-off that a lot of companies make today. It's not necessarily a way of like cutting corners. It's a way of cutting costs. And maybe that's a fair way of describing it. It's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. It's just something to be informed about when you're buying the boot or buying the shoe and knowing exactly what it is you're paying for and whether or not you're going to be happy that that's what you got. Next, he kind of talked about the overall construction and the quality of the makeup. He looked at the insole, he looked at the actual like stitch, the shape of the mock toe, the shape of the apron, whether it's a functional apron actually joining two pieces of leather, or it's just a decorative apron that's hand sewn in there to create the aesthetic that it's joining two pieces of leather, but really it's just a single leather vamp with the stitch detail going around, creating a very similar aesthetic. Looking at a few of the key responses that I want to focus on here. This is a very short one. This is from Dashing Chicago, and Sean, I don't know Sean personally. He seems like a very nice guy. This is not anything personal against Sean, just a great example. We'll kind of get into more of the specifics here in a second.
I want to address real briefly that issue with Anvil, whatever their face is, dissecting Alden 405.
This guy has, again, 650-some thousand followers on YouTube. He's put in the work. He's built a small business, much like Sean has. And he's trying to belittle that guy by pretending like he doesn't actually know his name.
Alden 405. My overall feeling is I don't really care. Everyone's subjectiveness of it's $600, oh my god. When you're a fanboy for other brands, you're always going to turn around and bash something else, especially in this day and age with TikTok and YouTube.
I'm going to jump in real quick. Yeah. I'm not a fan of Rose Anvil, but just in his defense, I don't really see him as a fanboy of any brands. He does the same thing to a number of brands.
You know what? And I think I'm probably speaking for most Alden retailers at that point. I stand by Alden, and Anvil can go themselves.
Now, to build off what I have more of a problem with, there is no excuse for saying that to anybody. Yeah, I don't need to say anything else about that. This is a blog, I've never actually heard of this blog before. This is 100 Wears. The first part he talks about here is leather, and he claims that Alden is a dress boot, it's not a work boot. He chose the wrong boot boot to review. He should have chosen an Indy boot that's made in like CXL or a more rugged leather in order to be able to compare it to White's, Nick's, other handmade boots from the United States. It's a completely flawed theory because he was reviewing the Alden Indy Boot. He wasn't reviewing other versions of Alden's mock toe boots. Those other versions are not the Indy Boot. Those other versions have specific model numbers. There's only one Alden Indy Boot, and it's the 405. When he's making this comparison, he's not saying this is a junk boot that's gonna fall apart and you shouldn't even wear it, you shouldn't even buy it because day one it's gonna be a piece of shit. He never said that. What he said is that comparatively to other boots that are actually made by hand in the United States that retail for similar price points, this is leaving a lot to be desired. These two made in America products, one is all leather, one is leather board. I'm gonna go with the all leather, and that's gonna give you a much higher value. Here you can kind of see he's calling out other makers that he believes uses leather board throughout their construction. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. You're kind of throwing darts against the board, hoping something just distracts you from the fact that what the point was is that for $600, if you're looking for an American-made boot, there are options that could get you something of more value, all depending on what it is that you value. Or more often than not, you're not paying for the highest quality of materials, the highest quality of craftsmanship, or just the overall best value of boot. What you're paying for is a history of that brand or of that style of boot. That's kind of the big thing with heritage, is that when you're selling the idea of heritage, that's what you're selling, is like the idea of that brand, the idea of that style. You're not always selling a tangible, better product. And if I go to that retailer, I go to that shoemaker and I ask them what the value is, and they just tell me it's because it's worth it and I stand by them. And they can't actually articulate what the value is, why their shoe may be better than someone else's, why their shoe is going to give you a better experience, a better product. They can't articulate that. They've completely lost all of my confidence. Hopefully you just have an opinion to share with it as well. Looking forward to hearing about that in the comments. If you want to see more videos like this, definitely let me know in the comments. Sometimes I enjoy these.